housing or whatever. These are the things we have to address. And the fact that if it takes so much longer to get through the process while staff is working on these kind of items, then we have to start talking about where staff and how staff is deployed. This is a great symbolic accomplishment. Defensible people I know and respect say that's about what it'll be in Mendocino County. If we need a symbolic victory here to make people feel good, fine. If we need a target for other people to act badly, that's fine too. But the other side of it is that this is not a good way to be spending our time, and I will shut up because that's about as much time as I'm prepared to devote to this item at this moment.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other comments from the board members? I'd like to call for public comment on this ordinance. Any members of the public wishing to speak to this item, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and keep your comments to 3 minutes if possible.
Good morning. Lisa Hilligus from Legal Services of Northern California. I'm one of these people who's devoted quite a bit of time to this inclusionary zoning ordinance in its various forms. And I'm very pleased that we're at a point where it's practically in a final form. I know the planning team, the housing task force, and the housing providers were very dedicated to trying to get something on paper that might work. The purpose of this ordinance is to try to get more units built in Mendocino County that people can afford to live in, purchase, or rent. There's a lot of compromise. For those of you who remember the first ordinance that came before you 2 years ago, the proposal from the task force that it would be applied to everybody. The idea being that it would generate the funds that are needed to be able to build units when we have fractions of units from developments, and that it would apply to the most, it would create the most housing. It would apply to the smallest scale of developments. And I still today think that that's a wiser approach if you want to have an effective inclusionary zoning ordinance. I think that 2 years ago, there were statistics provided to you showing you what the history of development is for housing development in Mendocino County. We don't have very many developments that are 10 or more. I think we all know that. I think the numbers will show you that even in the last 10 or 15 years, and that it makes more sense to apply this ordinance to major subdivisions of 5 or more units. I think it also makes more sense and should be considered to look at a higher percentage. If you increase the percentage from 10 to 15%, having that as the starting point, you will get more units. These are all ways to get more units, which is the primary intent of this ordinance. On page 6 of the ordinance, section 20.238.015, subsection C. I just want to, for the record, we're talking about fractional shares, which the ordinance already talks about when you have fewer than 20, when you're using the numbers that we have here. But it was never discussed in committee, at least none of the meetings that I went to, that projects on hillside areas or developments of 2 and fewer units per acre would automatically get an in lieu fee. And I would posit that that's not a good practice or policy, and that if a developer, they have an opportunity to always come to the board, talk to the planning and building department if they have a problem being able to work this ordinance into their development. But to give them an automatic walk is, I think, going to cause problems in the long run. And if they need to utilize the alternative of the in lieu fee, there are other mechanisms in this document that they can use. I'd also like to, we did talk a lot about incentives in committees and in all these meetings. On page 8 of the document, right up at the top, adding additional incentives to try to encourage development of low income housing, both for purchase or for rent. This section only adds incentives for very low and extremely low. I'm not sure if this was just overlooked, but I would like to see low income in there as an added incentive. So if a developer was willing to build a low income unit, that they would get an added incentive and more if they were going into the extremely low or very low. Those are all different income categories now that the state puts out for housing prices. The last thing is on page 12. The last paragraph D, this is for renter-occupied units, and if a individual if a market rate unit became available and a renter reached a point in their compensation that they were no longer eligible for an affordable unit, that the developer could switch that turn that unit into a market rate unit, and as long as there was another unit available that they could then make affordable. I'd like the word comparable put in there, so that if there's a comparable market rate unit available, I would hate to see a 3-bedroom unit being turned into a market rate and then just a 1-bedroom unit becoming affordable. I would like there to be just that term comparable. I don't see that'd be a problem.